For thousands of years, humans watched birds and dreamed of joining them in the sky. It took us until 1903 to finally do it. And it took us until 1969 to leave the planet entirely. But here's the uncomfortable truth no one talks about. Every single spacecraft we've ever built still works on the same basic principle as a medieval cannon. You throw mass one way, the rocket goes the other way. That's it. That's the entire foundation of space travel. But in 2023, a former NASA engineer walked into his garage and claimed to build something that breaks that rule entirely. No fuel, no exhaust, no reaction mass of any kind. And yet, according to him, it lifts itself off the ground. Either this man discovered something that rewrites physics, or he didn't. Tonight, we find out which one it is. His name has been all over the internet, in former NASA background, serious credentials, a workshop full of equipment that looks like it belongs in a physics department, not a garage. His device, he calls it an electrostatic thruster. The idea sounds deceptively simple. High-voltage electricity is pumped through a specially arranged set of asymmetric capacitors. And according to him, the resulting electric field doesn't just sit there, it pushes. It generates a directional force, upward. Without expelling anything, no combustion, no ion exhaust, no propellant of any kind. He posts the videos. The device appears to hover. And the internet absolutely loses its mind. Some people called it the most important invention of the century. Others called it the oldest trick in the book, a carefully staged illusion. Well, but here's what makes this story genuinely fascinating. This isn't actually a new idea. The concept has a name, the Biefeld-Brown effect. And it's been floating around the edges of physics since the 1920s. Thomas Townsend Brown first observed it. He noticed that high-voltage capacitors seem to experience a slight thrust in the direction of the positive plate. For decades, physicists argued about whether the force was real or simply ionic wind. Air molecules getting ionized and pushed, creating the illusion of lift in a vacuum-like environment. The question our ex-NASA engineer claims to have answered is simple. Does it still work in a vacuum? Because if it does, then ionic wind can't explain it. And if ionic wind can't explain it, then something else entirely is going on. Let's talk about why this matters so deeply to physicists, and why the scientific community reacts with such immediate skepticism. Newton's third law is not a suggestion. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. In conventional rockets, that reaction is the exhaust. Hot gas flies out the back. The rocket flies forward. The math is clean. The physics is airtight. An electrostatic thruster that works in a vacuum would violate this. It would generate thrust without expelling anything, force from nothing. And in physics, nothing comes from nothing. Now, to be fair, there are legitimate tested technologies that approach this territory. Ion thrusters, for example, are real. NASA uses them. They work by accelerating charged particles out of a nozzle at extraordinary speed. The exhaust is nearly invisible, but it exists. The reaction mass is there. The difference with an electrostatic thruster of this design is the claim that no mass leaves the system at all. That's the line. That's the wall. Most physicists will tell you, if you see thrust and no expelled mass, you haven't discovered a new law of physics. You have a measurement error. But here's the uncomfortable counter-argument. Science has been wrong before. Famously, repeatedly, embarrassingly wrong. Quantum mechanics itself looks like it violates classical intuition at nearly every turn. So the question isn't whether we want it to be true. The question is, what does the data actually show? Now here's where the story gets even more interesting, because this garage experiment isn't the only device of its kind attracting serious attention. Meet the IVO Quantum Drive. Unlike a viral YouTube video, though this one made it onto an actual spacecraft, IVO Limited, a small American aerospace company, developed a thruster that they claim operates on similar controversial principles. And in 2023, it was launched into orbit aboard a commercial satellite. The promise? A propellantless drive, thrust generated through quantum vacuum fluctuations, manipulating the fabric of space itself, essentially to produce movement. If that sounds like science fiction, it's because until recently it was. But IVO raised real funding. They got a real launch. The device went to real orbit, and then contact with the satellite was lost. The mission failed, not because the thruster was tested and found wanting, but because of an unrelated electrical failure on the host spacecraft. The drive itself was never formally evaluated in orbit. No, and so the question remains, beautifully, frustratingly unanswered. What's notable here isn't the failure. Satellites fail all the time. What's notable is that a propellantless thruster, a concept that most mainstream physicists still regard as physically impossible, was deemed credible enough to fly. The investors believed it. The launch provider accepted it. It went to space. That's not nothing. Let's take a moment to think about what it would actually mean if any of this is real. Today, the single greatest limitation of deep space exploration isn't distance, it isn't time, it's fuel. The Voyager probes, the farthest human-made objects in existence, were launched, carrying enormous amounts of propellant just to escape Earth's gravity. Well, getting to Mars takes months, not because space is impossibly vast, but because chemical rockets run out of fuel. A working propellantless thruster would change everything. Not gradually, not incrementally, completely. A spacecraft that doesn't need fuel never runs dry, it accelerates continuously. Missions that currently take years could potentially take weeks. The asteroids, the outer planets, Alpha Centauri, even within a human lifetime. This is why people get excited. This is why the internet shares these videos millions of times. Because even a 1% chance that this is real is worth taking seriously. The stakes are that high. But revolutionary technology doesn't only live in space. Sometimes it lives 35,000 feet above the ground, inside a pressurized aluminum tube, carrying 300 people who are almost entirely trusting the laws of physics to behave themselves. Aviation is extraordinarily safe. Statistically, flying is the safest form of long-distance travel humans have ever invented. But extraordinarily safe and completely safe are not the same thing. Which is why a proposed safety concept called Rebirth is generating quiet but serious conversation in aerospace engineering circles. The core idea is bold. What if a commercial aircraft could survive a crash? Not walk away from a rough landing, but genuinely survive a catastrophic, uncontrolled impact. Rebirth proposes a system combining AI-driven emergency response with a network of external airbags that deploy around the fuselage in the final moments before impact. The AI component would monitor flight data in real time, not just to alert pilots, but to begin automatically managing energy dissipation, structural load, and deployment timing faster than any human could react. The airbags would act as a crumple zone, absorbing impact energy across the entire outer surface of the aircraft rather than concentrating it at a single point of failure. It sounds almost absurdly ambitious, but so did seatbelts once, so did anti-lock brakes, so did every safety system we now take for granted. The concept is unproven. It faces enormous engineering challenges: weight, drag, deployment reliability, structural integration. But the underlying philosophy is sound. We don't accept that cars must be fatal in a crash. Why do we accept it for aircraft? Here is what we know for certain. The electrostatic thruster videos are compelling and almost certainly explained by ionic wind or measurement error in atmosphere. The vacuum tests remain inconclusive and poorly documented. The IVO Quantum Drive flew to orbit and told us nothing because the mission failed before the test could begin. A second flight is reportedly being planned. And Rebirth remains a concept, not a product, not a prototype, but an idea that might one day save lives if someone is willing to build it. None of these are hoaxes, exactly. They are something more interesting than hoaxes. What they are questions dressed up as answers, wrapped in enough engineering and ambition and genuine mystery that we can't quite dismiss them. And maybe that's the point. Every technology that changed the world looked wrong before it looked right. The Wright brothers' aircraft looked like a kite built by bicycle mechanics. The first computers looked like furniture. Somewhere, right now, in a garage, in a lab, on a whiteboard, someone is working on something that the physics textbooks say is impossible. History says to pay attention.